Hey everyone, welcome to the Parts Girl podcast. I'm super excited to be interviewing Nick Gianake. Welcome, Nick.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. So Nick is the parts manager at the Ken Garff Ford of Greeley in Colorado. So I'm really excited to have a parts manager on the Parts Girl podcast because I don't get very many of you guys. It's funny whenever I reach out to our clients, they're like, "Really, you guys, you really want to interview me? I'm not that exciting." I'm like, oh, "Come on." So
Well,
thank you, Nick, for taking the time.
you're welcome. I'm glad to be aboard.
Yeah, and we've done panels together on the round table. You've been on our panel before, and I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on the show because I loved your perspective on parts and the things that we talked about. But I want to go through, just kind of what you're going through because you just took over for the store over about a year ago.
Yep.
So before we were talking about how it's just like you're constantly going through like this rebuilding cycle. I think
Mhm.
that we all kind of go through that. Is like we think we have it figured out and then something changes or we have an obstacle and then we got to rebuild.
Right.
So talk about how that is in your world, just like how do you deal with that and what are some things you're like, okay, let's go back to the drawing board or whatnot.
Well, basically, how it started out when I moved to Greeley, got started on with them at the Garf organization. It was totally different world for me coming, new to Ford. Not new to the industry because it's been my life in the industry, but new to Ford. And the first thing I had to do is build trust with my team because they didn't know me. I moved from out of state. I wasn't a local. I was a transplant, and they didn't understand what I was about. So
Yeah.
for the first 6 months, I was just really learning them and getting them to learn me and learn my ways. And so that part of it is building trust and rebuilding the organization to where we are working as a team, and they can have that trust. And if I'm asking them to do changes, they can follow without any hiccups and any rebounds.
Yeah, I think that's probably the hardest thing is when you have this new person come in and then you see opportunities because you're an outsider coming in, so you're like, "Oh, this is how I've done it and this is where I see you guys can improve." And then the people that are in it are kind of like, "This is the way we've always done it. So why are we going to change?" So how do you deal with that like, working on building that trust? Like what are some things that you do before you actually make some changes?
Get into the trenches with them. you know uh, First and foremost, if you want to make a change, you got to live the change. So if it's something that's going, you feel like it's not going in the right direction and you want to alter that, get in there with them to make sure that you're understanding exactly what's going on and what your goals are, because you might think of something, you're looking at it from a 10,000-foot view, and they're at zero, they're at ground zero. So get into ground zero and get your hands dirty and figure out what's going to be right and how we can fix it, or your idea was totally wrong and maybe we can readdress it and go another path. But ultimately, if you're not in the trenches with your team, you can't make the changes because it's not going to set in stone.
Yeah, I agree. And I hear that so much in interviewing leaders is, I think the biggest thing they say is they get on their level, they get on with them, they work with them in not every day, but like showing them that you are still working in that process. Because you're right, you can see something, but then when you get down to that, you could see, oh, maybe I was like wrong, or maybe I need to shift it a little bit more, or even getting their perspective on like, hey, I was thinking about this, what do you think about it? I think that also helps, right? With like getting
Yeah.
buy-in of like, what do you think?
Yeah, that they have to get the buy-in first. And just as a general discussion, I was talking with one of my guys earlier we started talking, and he came up to me with some ideas. He goes, "Hey, I want to throw this by you and see. We got some changes coming up. I want to I want to put my 2 cents in and try to figure out what's going to be the best that we can do it as a team, because really we got to come together. And we're actually have a reduction in our workforce, and it's we're all going to have to take on more responsibility. And he's jumping on board to want to come up with the solution before it actually has to take place. So the buy-in and the trust is there. The And I feel my team has that with, and just they just got to get better with each other.
Yeah, getting better with each other. So is that kind of where the whole like silo thing and breaking down the barriers of the
Yeah,
walls?
you don't want any silos in interdepartmental or outer departmental. In other words, for parts to service or service to sales or whichever the way you want to follow the silo. But you definitely can't have silos within your department because that means individuality and they're running their own ship. And you cannot be successful as a department or with your team if they're not all as one on the team. We just can't be successful.
No.
And that part of the silos, that was first and foremost that I had to win them. And now that I have their trust, it's just to keep the silos down or build a good silo, build a strong team. There is good and bad silos, but be on the positive side of it instead of the negative.
Yeah, exactly. And let's talk about your guys' parts operation, obviously, because you're the parts manager. You guys are fairly large, if I'm remembering. Like, you have a big operation,
Pretty
big
decent
wholesale.
operation. Pretty decent operation. I have three drivers and I'm running ragged every day. We have a team of 10,
Wow.
and we seem to do pretty decent together. I mean, we have to, some days, when people are off, you have to work harder together. But other than that, day by day, what we just work to strive to be one. Not individuals.
So, if you would give any advice to a parts manager taking over a parts department, what are some of the things that you did, like steps, just like two or three steps that first thing you did to help, like,
The first thing you do is find your office. Second thing you do is make sure that you're in the trenches with them. If your office is far away from your team, you can't learn them.
mm-mm.
So put yourself in their in their shoes. Move your office closer, or you do whatever you can do to be a part of it. But basically the first steps is you got to listen. You got to to close your mouth, open your ears, and listen to what they need, and learn each individual person because each one of them has a different personality, a different work ethic, and you got to listen and learn and then execute. But the first thing you do is just listen.
That's a good point because I think that you could have came in and said, this is what I did at my other store. This is how we're gonna do it. But instead, you kind of took a step back. I'm sure you implemented some things that worked for you, but like, I think it sounds like the first step was just like figuring out where they are at and what do they need first, and
Yeah,
then
because
yeah,
when I took over, there was the previous parts manager. Basically, he's still with us. He's just at our other store. He was doing both stores, and it was way too much for him traveling back and forth. So that's one of the reasons they brought me on, and his way of leading and my way of leading were totally different, and that's where it comes to, you know, listening. Because well, he did this and he did that. Well, okay, well, let's try this way instead, and let's see if it works better. And the team, change is evolving every day. And, you're never going to have change. You're always going to have change.
hmm
And the team's not going to like it because they're so used to being settled in one fashion, one way.
yeah.
And, making the change is a good thing.
It is. I think we're always challenged with obstacles and changes and things that we're going like it just helps us improve even when we feel like or don't know if we actually need to improve. Like with you taking on more of the wholesale, was that what was going on? You're losing the wholesale person, so like now you're kind of taking that on where
Oh,
you're
what?
gonna actually. Oh,
Oh,
sorry. Go ahead.
my warehouse person.
Your warehouse person.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
All this. So, now I get to, go back and get in the trenches of that part of the industry or that part of the department and work it,
Yeah.
and be that person, so again, you always have to adapt and change. And this is something that's coming up at the first of the month. So,
Yeah.
here we go.
Here we go. And it's so funny as an industry, we're so like it's hard to change, but we're always going through change.
Yep.
Like, it's always been done the same way, but things are always changing.
Yep.
It's just
It's
funny.
amazing. The change is could be the simplest change in the world. It could be the hardest to implement because of everybody is so used to, and they just can't get past it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some things that you help them how to like get past changing?
Really, just ideas. The fun part was it was just revamping my office. To be honest with you, that was the hardest change that they took.
Really?
My office was in the back 40. Again, it's a Ford store, so they, for whatever reason, the Ford manager's office in this building was in the back of the warehouse, away from the rest of the team.
Oh,
So I
wait,
actually,
for some reason that's always what happens.
and I was like, the very first thing I did was is hey, I need to be with you. So I emptied the office out, moved some parts bins where was up there next to them, so we had to revamp all of that and rework the warehouse. But I wanted to be next to them. I wanted to listen. I wanted to be able to put the fire out before the fire started, or hey, they could come to me in a quick second and say, hey, I need your help. I need, we can't locate this, and I need you to do that, or hey, we got an issue with the counter ticket, and such. And you could handle that far away, but when you're right there with them, you're more involved.
Hmm. Yeah, you are. And I think I was just talking to someone else, and it's like, it's almost like, because I feel like parts managers are always in this like fight mode, like not fighting, but like you're just putting out fires, putting out
Right,
like
right,
surviving. So it's like you're almost like have to be in this fire. You want to be in a fire prevention mode, like
right.
yeah. So you're
Yeah,
not so that you can actually work on the business and improve. Because when you're constantly putting out fires, you can't step back and actually, you know,
yeah. It's nice to be there up there with them because of the fact that you say fires, but it could be a simple issue with a DMS.
like a brush fire. Is that a
You
small
know,
one?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's simple stuff. Mostly
Yeah.
there's the hard stuff. Yeah, we discuss one on one in private conversation. I still have that office, but we use it as a break room. So,
Oh, that's good.
turned it into a break room, and where we have our one on one monthly one on one counter people meeting with each other.
Yeah,
That's where I go in private, or if we could just have to go talk things privately, that's where we go.
that's good. That I like that idea of just like getting up there with them, having office there or a desk there, but then having that private space so you can have those one-on-ones and a break room or whatnot. So I do want to ask you. So we're already halfway almost through the year, which is insane.
It's amazing that it's like we're May already, and it's where are we? What are we doing? It just seemed like
Yeah.
yesterday was the first in January.
I know. I'm like, and then I was looking back too because I'm pretty sure you're going to be the 100th episode of the podcast.
Oh, great!
Um, yeah, which and so hopefully I got that right. If we didn't, then whatever. The next one's the 100th. But um, I feel like I just started the podcast, and I feel like it's only been a year. But I'm like, and then being active on LinkedIn. I feel like it's only been a year, but it's been like three. It's
Wow,
crazy. Yeah.
time flies, but when you're doing what you love, it doesn't. Time is of nothing. It just never.
Yeah.
I've been doing this my whole career, and it's amazing how fast things have gone by.
Yeah. And I think when you have kids, I think it goes even faster. I feel like life has gone way faster now that I have a family.
Yeah,
It's a weird feeling, but it's a good one.
right. Yeah.
But going back to being halfway through the year, how I feel like there's a lot of chaos going on. I feel like there's a lot more unknowns now than there were, and I don't want to bring up the C word, but the COVID time.
Right.
Like, I just feel like everyone's kind of on this, like, do you want to call it like a teeter? I don't know. So,
Sure.
how are you handling this chaos, and what are your outlooks on,
Yeah.
how you guys are going to continue to grow?
Well, way we're continuing to grow is we just have to build the business, our business model with wholesale and getting in out there and getting more business with the local businesses, getting involved. We're starting. Actually, I say we. I've wanted to get involved with the city council, and talk with them and see if there's any businesses that we can do. get there. I mean, we're involved in the community. We always have been, but we're trying to get more involved. And now that I'm in the same town as I work, I want to be part of that, like, building of getting to know people and that's not in the business to try to help build the business.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a huge part in building the business, and I think there's a huge opportunity for dealerships too to get more involved in schools and make it aware that there's a career and there's a good opportunity being in auto and dealership in the
Right.
dealership world. Yeah, I think that's a big deal. So you guys, you're growing, you're going through all those obstacles and things and just shifting, and that's what we have to do is adapt. Is there any advice that you would give anyone that's, I don't know, curious about getting into auto? I feel like no one is really curious though.
Right.
You just fall
The,
into it.
right. You start off, say, hey, you got a friend, and you get involved, but the
Yeah.
automotive industry is not going away. It's just you got to be able to evolve and to keep up with technology. If I could tell any person that is asking me a question about how do I get involved, well, you can't start at the top. You gotta get down and start in the trenches. If it's on the variable side or the sales side, you got to start off with in the lot tech or the service the porter side of it to where you can build, and then you could get into sales. On the fixed side, I mean, you just got to start off, basically, in the parts side, you start off in the warehouse or as a driver and learn and get to learn the part numbers and the locations and get to learn how things are put away. You start there and then you get into the sales side of it. But you can always, I guess, not say cheat, but jump steps, and you go into sales if you're a great salesperson. But ultimately, you still got to take a step back and to learn the whole facet of the department. So I would highly recommend it, people in this industry because it's not going away. I mean,
Yeah.
it's you go back to this, like you said, the C word, back to COVID. We were classified as essential workers. I mean, we weren't first responders, but we were essential workers. So we had to carry, letters of, okay, this person can be traveling right at this time to go to work
Yeah.
because people needed their cars and needed to be fixed. So the automotive industry generally, people overlook it, but yet, you know, we are essential. We do keep the rubber on the road. We do keep people making money and getting back and forth to keep the economy moving. So it's a big part of it. It's just people don't look at it in that fashion.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it because we are helping. Well, you guys are really helping, getting people to work so that we can make money. And yeah, it's a whole circle, full circle.
It's great
I
to
thought
be a
of it.
part of it.
Yeah, it is. It's great to be on my side too, as being a partner, vendor, whatever you want to call it, because it's rewarding to help like support and make people's lives easier, I guess,
Right.
in their job. So,
Understood. Appreciate what you guys do for the industry as well. So, I mean, you guys
thank you.
heard a lot of good things and, look forward to hearing more.
Yeah, yeah, it's really fun to do what we're doing. And gosh, I had a question for you. Oh, it's a kind of it's not a negative question, but I would love to know, like, what's your least favorite part, or what was your least favorite job throughout like your whole career?
In the parts industry, the least favorite,
Yeah.
well, it's going to, I'm going to be honest, it was back when I first started. I was a parts driver.
Okay.
And actually, I started before that. I was in the warehouse it wasn't automotive, it was a commercial. It was for Heister forklifts and grunting the parts. But the worst part of my career was when I've had to be a driver in Southern California, not knowing the area and having to learn and, getting lost. So if you
Yeah.
want to say, that part of it that was the sad time, I guess you would say, because didn't know anything about the industry.
Yep.
I learned quick. So
Yeah, and I could see how that, especially like there's so much more technology now to help you with routes and stuff and not to get
yeah,
lost, but just it's
back
even
then
if
it
you
was
yeah.
Thomas guides and pagers.
Oh
So
my gosh.
whenever we would get, okay, there was a major accident. Well, you can't call your boss and say, hey, stuck in traffic. It's going to be a while. And you get that antsy feeling because you can't do the right thing because you're stuck.
Yeah.
Now it's like you said, technology's there. There's trackers on the vehicle. You know where your drivers are at all time. There's communication tools. Some dealers have phones or tablets for the team that they can go back and forth with them. And they know exactly where they are, and
Yeah.
you know the trust is there.
Yeah, yeah, that's it's come a long way for
Yep.
sure.
Right.
I do remember Thomas guides. My parents used that because I was around. I'm like just young or just old enough that I was like right when the cell phones were like really, you know, and we didn't. I remember my mom had a pager, so
Right.
kind of remember, and dial up internet and all that stuff.
We've come a long way, haven't we?
We have come a long way. Yeah, it feels like it's just yesterday, but it's been a while, and the technology is crazy, I think. But even if you have that technology, sometimes even if you're not familiar with the area, it's still hard, you know,
Oh
to
yeah.
yeah.
I'm still learning. I know I haven't learned the whole area where I'm at, but it's just getting easier daily. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It does get easier. It's fun moving to a new area. You get to learn all new things. So
yep. Yep.
well, is there anything that you want to share or add as we wrap up the show? Any burning desire you want to share?
I just wanted, the listeners to understand the industry. Again, it's everything's built on us doing the right thing the first time. And that's, sometimes we got to have step back and ask the customer questions that sometimes get uncomfortable because we don't know the answers, and they're there for us. They're there asking for our help, and we, just be able to ask back, be communicated, your needs and such. So,
Yeah. I think people are way more understanding when you're genuinely trying to help them. And even if you don't know the answer, you try and let them know I'll get that answer for you
yeah,
rather than trying to just make it up or, not trying to even help.
really, really, honestly, and never say no. I mean, because if you instantly give a person, no, I can't get that,
hmm
they give up, and then they don't like you, and then then back and forth. But as a business and a business leader, you want to never say no. You want to always say, you know I'll try. you
Yeah.
know always say yes, I can, if the part's there or whatever. But you always want to say I'll try. Never never derogatory remarks.
Oh, no, never. Yeah. If you don't have it, you, you're like, don't just say I don't have it.
Yeah.
You're going to figure it out. But being honest, like, yeah, I don't have it, but let's try to figure this out for you. Yeah, I mean, dealing with the public and dealing with people can be really hard. People can be brutal.
Yes, and 1,000% correct. People can be brutal because they have a problem and they don't know how to fix it, and they lash out at and they don't, sometimes they don't mean it. So,
Yeah, yeah. That's a whole nother topic I think to cover and just talk about how to help your team with dealing with people. So,
right.
yeah. All right. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I really loved our conversation. I think a lot of people are going to get value with this. And thank you for being episode number 100, which is crazy.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you and appreciate the invite. Look forward to speaking more with you down the line.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. PartsEdge, the power tool for your parts department. We hope you're leaving feeling motivated, challenged, and inspired.